The Smitten Sky by Devanshi Sehra. Please be sure to read the list of trigger warnings before you read the book. Chapter 1. I looked at my bleeding leg and struggled to stifle my scream of pain with every ounce of strength I had left in my body. This was my last chance at escape. There was no time to stop. I pushed at the ground and stood up again before the guards could find me hidden behind this all too shattered wall. I was almost out of town. The night was dark, and I could see the forest starting at the distance. All I needed was a way to make it to the forest, and I could slow down. It would be easy. I looked around and tried to scan the area, remaining hidden behind the wall. The rain was an added advantage. Although the heavy storm was making me colder by the minute, people were not on the streets. That was the only reason I made it so far. Else the people of Kolha would have murdered me at the first glimpse. I needed to get out of here. I was too far from the center of the town, and there was no way a fairy would present herself and offer me a cape. I needed to run. Like this. One person spotted me and I would be dead. I turned and started running again. I could only wish no guard was left. I'd been able to kill a few who came in my way, but I left many wounded. They could still be following me. And there was him, that one guard. I could swear he was there in the beginning. But where did he go? He looked different than the people here, like he carried a charm, a soft glow to his skin. He should have tried to attack me, but he just vanished. I abruptly stopped and turned. I felt a presence. Everything looked the same. The night, the rain, the haunting view of the town's outskirts, houses far away, my bleeding leg. I realized I had started shivering. A faint sound of a crunch made me jump, and I quickly turned my head to see what had caused it. But there was nothing. It could be an animal, or it could be someone, or it could be that mysterious guard. The people of Kolha didn't let trespassers live. He had to have a plan, or he would have attacked by now. I remained still and heightened every sense I had. I was not going to die on my first roll here. The only sound I could hear was my wildly beating heart, heavy breaths, and the raindrops. I could be imagining too. Maybe there was no one. I took another breath and started running again. My leg was getting heavier. Every step was becoming an effort. The rain wasn't making it easy either. I kept looking back just in case a flying dagger found its way to my heart from behind. I entered the forest and became immediately thankful for the dense shade of the trees. What felt like a heavy storm now was a soft downpour. The air felt slightly warmer here, but cold enough for my teeth to start alerting the nearby wild animals. I crossed my arms across my chest and started walking at a comfortable pace. Thanks to the moon, there was no need for me to start a fire in the heavy rain. There was enough light for me to not walk straight into a tree. The pain was getting worse in my leg. I needed to make it back to my secret spot near the river in Onofa and use my herbs. I'd found the discarded ointment 7 months ago by the water, where I usually found myself sitting, and I'd been grateful to whoever must have lost it. It always worked miracles on my bleeding skin. My endeavor wasn't a total waste. I couldn't find many answers, but I knew one thing. Kolha had a weakness. There could not be any other reason why that room was so protected. If it hadn't been for that cunning witch, I would have at least managed to get some information about what was inside that room. What was I going to say when I went back? Hi, there was a room I saw, but the doors were closed, so better luck next time. That would not bode well. I risked my life again to find no big prize. Only the gods knew what would be the price this time. But it would be really painful. I stopped walking before frustration made me do something reckless. I embraced the cold wind hitting me and looked at the sky hidden by the forest trees. The canopy of moonlight and raindrops on my face almost felt divine. Almost. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. This disconnect I felt from the world felt like a part of myself now. I guessed the gap between me and serenity would never be bridged. I wished I could have a normal life, respectable job, possibly in some trade, married to a guy, have kids, no drama, and then die a boring life. But that was never the case with me. My life was all pain and no peace, theft and no gift, spying and no space. Another wave of cold wind hit me, and I shivered from top to bottom. There was a scent. I couldn't pick what it was, but someone was here. I wasn't alone. It would have been a miracle if I was. I immediately took my fighting stance. Like before, I couldn't see anyone, but this time I could feel there was no animal. There was a person somewhere in these woods. I cautiously looked around me and found no one. I took the dagger strapped to my thigh in my hand and said, "Who's there?" Nothing. No sound. Just the rain falling, and what should have been something closer to peace was yet another moment of saving my life. I knew it. I could see a form taking shape under the canopy of moonlight. I steadied myself and tightened the grip on my dagger. I took a deep breath, ignoring the ache in my wounded leg. Someone was walking toward me. Shit, that someone also carried a sword. Why did I have to lose my sword to a dying man's chest? There hadn't been enough time for me to get it back, and now I might need to suffer the consequences of that decision. I would be dead, but death was probably better than my life. I would embrace it, just not today. My father needed me. The man seemed to have been working on his muscles for years. I would look like a rabbit in front of a tiger. He still stood in the dark, but there was a little moonlight falling on his face. It was him, the mysterious guard. I knew he hadn't vanished because he felt like going away. He was back to kill me. He was dressed like all the other guards there, black shirt and tights, surprisingly clean boots. That was one difference in his attire then. He was a little scary to look at. His eyes were brighter than they were supposed to be, a light shade from what I could see from the distance. His skin a little lustrous in the dark. He felt different. I suppressed my shiver. Was he deliberately hiding his face? But what was the point? I'd already seen him. He was the guard who didn't attack. Well, he now would.
"You're bleeding,"
the voice from the dark said. I wasn't expecting such a seductive voice from my killer, but I was obviously not going to say that to him. Neither was I expecting a remark on my wound. "Thanks for letting me know," I retorted. I was getting impatient talking to a poorly hidden face. He planted his sword next to where he stood and crossed his arms across his chest, as if he expected me to say more. I felt a small piece of wood next to me on the ground. I stomped my foot on one side of it to make it jump and caught it. I didn't let him think of what I was doing and immediately threw the log at his face. He twisted at his waist and caught the wood. Moonlight fell on him, and I felt something change. I saw his eyes, an intense grey. I lost my balance and took a step back. My dagger started slipping from my hand. He had done something! Panic blossomed in my chest. He had caught me in a grip, a hold I couldn't see but sense. His bright eyes held me captive. He disappeared from his spot, and in an instant he was in front of me. He held my hand and didn't let the dagger slip. His other hand came to my waist as it helped me regain my balance. He towered over me, holding me, the drizzle falling on us, and his strange eyes made me forget where I was standing. He kept his distance, though, just one hand on my waist balancing me, and the other keeping my dagger in my hand. I felt weak. I felt the serenity I'd been wishing for. His eyes were magical. His tanned skin was beautiful. His touch on my hand felt like healing me to my core. His hand on my waist felt like a promise to support me for centuries.
"You okay?"
His voice carried a hint of concern. And horror? That damn voice also jarred me from my dream. I took a step back, and he let me. What was I thinking? Serenity I'd been wishing for? Ridiculous. He still hadn't attacked. Was he not here to kill me? I felt normal again, but didn't. He was different. He wasn't like me, or father, or those guards, or anyone else I knew. He did something to me. I had never lost my balance by just eye contact. Never. Who would have, though? And what the hell were those stupid thoughts? "Who are you?" I heard myself asking. He remained silent and took a step back instead. I saw his jaw tighten, but he still felt too close. "What did you do? And how did you appear right in front of me in an instant when you were definitely standing pretty far? Still no answer. I swallowed. I was starting to freak out now. What was he, a ghost? But a ghost surely couldn't be so handsome, right? Was that why he was trying to hide his face by standing in the shade? Did he know that I might have such a reaction to seeing him in the moonlight? I took a shaky breath. He would have killed me by now if he planned to. It wasn't much probable for me to kill him if I had to regain my footing just by looking at his eyes. If I could make it back alive and inform the queen of him, I would be safe. My father would be safe. This was the information I came looking for. He was possibly the very weakness of Kolha that Onofa wanted to exploit. I just needed to run away from him. I possibly could. If he was as loyal as others, I wouldn't have even heard him take a breath, let alone feel the magical touch of his hand. But if he wasn't loyal, he could support us. He would be a jewel in our armies. Not that I gave a single feces fuck about what happened in the kingdom of Onofa, but at least information about him would let me survive peacefully. I needed to know more. Who are you? I repeated.
You shouldn't have been wearing this.
I couldn't have agreed more, but I had to act tough. And him pointing out my idiotic attire only strengthened my belief of him being a traitor to Kolha. Awesome. The stars were in my favor. But should he be trusted? I would never let him know what I was thinking and how much he affected me, and the fact that he was observing my outfit didn't help. Who are you to tell me what I should wear? I asked, acting irritated.
I don't have a problem with your completely wet, too pretty white blouse.
He said with a grin. Blood ran to my face. I looked down and was so happy to know that I had chosen the blouse with good fabric. Yes, it was soaked, but nothing could be seen.
The problem with your clothing is the enemy crest sewn into it.
I looked at him to find him slightly annoyed. I wore a cape on top of it, but it was torn while fighting. I answered sheepishly. How could I explain to him that what I was wearing was what almost everyone in Onofa wore? No clothes I wore were without this stupid crust. Not a single damn cloth. I was bound to serve the crown before birth. I was basically born with the purpose of serving the king and queen. Why? How would I know? They thought I'd be an excellent fighter, but I was pretty mediocre. I knew my limitations and accepted them. I was not ashamed to be the way I was. I never would be.
Your leg hurts?
Your head hurts?
What?
He looked as puzzled as he sounded. I almost laughed but kept my cool. Why haven't you killed me yet?
Oh, I will.
He stretched his neck and shoulders on both sides. I could hear the sound of his bones cracking, and I could tell it felt good. Then suddenly his face grew serious, and he looked at me with those predatory eyes and whispered,
In a while.
His words made me shiver, and I instinctively took a step back, but he closed the distance between us immediately. He looked so dangerous and gorgeous at the same time. His dark, wet hair aligned themselves in an annoyingly pleasing manner on his head. I wouldn't make it alive out of this forest if he were a Kolha supporter. This would be my end. At least it would be a quick death, I hoped. If he possessed some mysterious power, surely he could make me die with no pain.
Meir,
He said, taking one more step toward me. There was hardly an inch between us now. I had to tilt my head back to look at him. My legs were locked in their place, mostly because I'd lost a hell lot of blood and were too heavy to move. I swallowed. What? I could barely whisper. My throat felt too tight. I hadn't recovered from his threat. I knew I still held my dagger, but I felt too scared to even move. Ever since he had relaxed the muscles in his shoulders, he looked predatory, as if he'd snap my neck the moment he saw movement. I knew my skills needed more practice. My dagger would never make it to his skin, even if I tried. And he was definitely not a normal person. Who knew how many hidden powers he hadn't shown me yet? I could not afford to act first in front of a predator whose strength I didn't know.
My name, Meir.
He answered. Now he chose to tell me his name? Was that what he wanted? Typical murderer trait, I said, totally annoyed. I knew I wouldn't live now, so better be fearless in speaking in front of my killer. My tongue would definitely be more skilled at retorts than him, I bet. Know the name of the last person you see, I mocked in a fake baritone. He held my hand holding the dagger. His grip was firm, but not painful. I could free my hand if I wanted to, but what good would it be if it resulted in me getting myself dead a few minutes before I was supposed to? He brought the dagger to his neck and pressed slightly. His grip on my hand grew tighter.
Fight me.
I will, I said with confidence. Faked, obviously.
But know that you can't win.
I know that too. That's part of the reason this dagger hasn't made you bleed yet. He immediately increased the pressure on his throat at my response. I wanted to take the dagger away, but he held my hand and dagger there, on his now bleeding throat. Was he suicidal? But I will not make it an easy win for you. I continued, ignoring the blood mixing with his black shirt.
I wouldn't want you to.
He immediately released me. Next thing I knew, his sword suddenly appeared in his hand, and he brought it down toward my face. I balanced myself and met the hard blow with my too reliable dagger. Every muscle in my body locked up. I wasn't expecting him to use that much power when he was talking so casually. But the thing that fucked with my head was that his weapon was planted several feet away from us. "Can you also summon swords in your hand out of the blue?" I asked, while twisting under another blow. I was inches under his sword. He really was trying to kill me.
Only the ones I possess.
He talked so casually and attacked so fiercely. I managed to deflect a few more strikes. Barely. He made another sweep of his sword to the space where he would have found my chest, but I bent and twisted quickly. But to not much gain. His leg came and kicked mine out from under me, and I hit the wet ground. I used my free hand to save my face from the tiny rocks. He slammed his sword deep into the ground and roughly held my hand with the dagger. He twisted my wrist while also pulling me up from the ground. My only weapon fell, and before I could react, he plastered my back to his chest. I could not afford to be trapped, but it was too late. He folded my arms across my chest with just one hand and gripped my neck with the other. He twisted it to the side and brought his face closer to my throat.
You entered my kingdom.
This was it. This was death. All the gentleness I'd seen in him had vanished. All but one. He held my neck as if to choke me, but didn't. Just held it. Gently. I was fucking forced to! I screamed before I could stop myself, years and years of frustration finding its way up my throat. I felt him freeze behind my back. If these were my last moments, I might as well be true to myself. I just hoped my father would survive my loss, but he had to know that I was headed to my end when I left.
I cannot let you leave, even if that were the case.
He lifted his hand from my neck and released me. I turned and looked at him. He lifted his hand and touched my cheek. I couldn't react. I stood still. Why did he stop? What was he doing now? He softly swept his thumb across my cheek and kept staring as if trying to solve a puzzle, when it should be me playing riddles. First, he had a conversation, then told me his name, then attacked, and now his hand was on my face. Like a caress. I'd never seen someone as handsome as him, especially when he gazed at me with awe and conflict. What was he up to? When was I going to be dead? His shoulders slumped. I could tell he wasn't going to fight anymore.
You killed 5. Forgive me.
Forgive him? For what? I was the one who murdered tonight, right? He traced his fingers down my neck and kept his hand on my shoulder.
You did wrong, and it's not in my hands to take the decision.
He met my eyes again in that intense way of his. Once again, I was captivated by those grey eyes, in the command of the wild swirls of his gaze, in the beauty of his face, in his straight nose and lush lips. My head gave in. I felt my body losing strength as his pupils dilated. This time, I fainted. I fell. This time, his hand didn't come on my waist to hold me. Thank you for listening to the first chapter of The Smitten Sky. If you enjoyed it, you can go ahead and find the book in ebook and paperback formats as of now on Amazon. The book is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Thank you and happy reading.